Hey everyone, Mike here, and thanks for joining us on the main track for another look at my HO scale Sedalia subdivision layout. Well, today we're looking at an industry I modeled, or should I say remodeled, here on my railroad, and that being the M.F.A. fertilizer plant. Well, the term plant with these facilities is kind of a misnomer, as they don't actually manufacture fertilizer, they simply serve as a distribution point. These facilities can be found all over the country, especially in rural areas with a heavy farming presence. They're operated by a variety of different ag agencies and companies, and most of them have a distinctive angled roofline like this. These structures have been common from the 1960s onward, if you're wondering if this would fit the era you model. Now, in Missouri, where I live, most of these types of facilities are operated by M.F.A, which is the Missouri Farmers Association. It's the predominant ag co-op operating in the state. Now, these really stand out because of the color, an almost fluorescent green. You can find these all over Missouri in small towns, and most of them are along train tracks and sometimes near feed mills and grain elevators. You'll usually find rail spurs running to these plants for delivery of loaded hopper cars full of different fertilizer materials, which can be mixed and sold to farmers in the vicinity. Thankfully, for research purposes, there are plenty of these plants I could get close enough to along abandoned rights-of-way that are now hiking trails or just off public roadways. The starting point for my structure is Blair Line's Farmer's Bulk Fertilizer Plant Kit. It's a nice laser-cut wood structure, pretty easy to build, though it's a little different than plastic kits you might be used to. Now, I built one of these a handful of years ago, and it's been on my layout. You might have noticed it in previous episodes here on the main track. Well, I'd like to think my modeling skills have improved over the years since I built this, so I figured this would be a good chance to create a better version with some changes to things here and there that I wished I would have done differently. Well, it seems no two of these fertilizer plants out there are exactly the same, and the same can be said for the Sedalia facility along the MKT line I'm modeling. So I needed to modify this kit to replicate the building I needed. This Blair Line kit has all the details I need and the walls with the correct angles for the roof line. So what I did is I used the walls to give me a good framework, and then I built a brand new shell with evergreen styrene sheets, and these come pre-scribed to represent the siding. Well, as you can see here, the prototype structures are normally made out of corrugated fiberglass siding, and that's because fertilizer corrodes metal, so they couldn't use metal siding. Even the fiberglass eventually started to decay over the decades, and during the 1990s and beyond, new concrete sidewalls were built up to provide support and protection from the caustic materials inside. Well, I used the elevator leg from the Blair Line kit, and this is what lifts the fertilizer from the rail spur at ground level up to the conveyor system that brings the product inside. Well, the handrails in the kit look good, as you can see on my original structure, but I felt they were a little on the thick side. And so I crafted a new walkway platform and handrails from Tichy Train Group Open Grate Platform and Handrails kit. The ladder and cage up the side comes from Walther's Caged Ladders and Vents kit. The loading conveyor in the kit is a great representation, and I'll be using that as is. Well, I fudged a little and modified the loading area. The prototype Sedalia plant has it on the back side, but I moved mine to the side so it can actually be seen. Well, despite the change, I feel it stays in line with my close enough modeling approach. People will recognize the building, but very few folks will have any idea it's a little different. Well, I added some additional bracing on the inside with various plastic scraps I had on hand. Well, I usually keep extra pieces and parts from projects just for stuff like this. Well, as for that bright green color, this turned out to be kind of tricky. It's definitely a unique shade. I played around with some colors years ago with the original building, and I think I got it pretty close. But since then, I was able to obtain these pieces of discarded siding from one of these M.F.A. plants, so I had myself an exact color match. But bear in mind with me, these pieces show what the color is today, and a lot of weathering and fading would have taken place since 1987, the year I'm modeling. The closest paint color I came up with was Tamaya's Pearl Green. I think it's a pretty good match and will look even better with some weathering. When it comes to these M.F.A. plants, I've heard of some guys using a shade close to what the Penn Central Railroad used on its trains, and if you have an airbrush, that's one route you could go. For plants operated by entities across the country other than M.F.A., I've seen white and gray used on those structures quite a bit. Well, the original roofs on these plants are made from shingles, and for that I used roof shingle sheets by JTT, and I painted it Tamiya Royal Light Gray. Well, if you're modeling a plant in more modern times, a white metal roof would be appropriate to reflect changes made to these buildings over the years. The Blair Line kit comes with some nice windows and doors, but as you can see here on the Sedalia plant, they're on the back side and not visible looking straight on from trackside, so I left those off of my model. Well, I did add the big loading doors where appropriate. Wrapping up, I painted the elevator leg white and added the white trim, also from evergreen styrene parts. Well, I might end up fibbing in one other spot and put an M.F.A. sign on the platform on top. As you can see, the Sedalia plant does not have that, but I've seen several M.F.A. plants that do, and I included one on my original structure. I think it adds a nice element and helps identify the building on the layout. I already had the sign made up on my computer ready to print out and go, but I'm still waiting to decide if I want to do that. To take the shine off, I made sure to spray on a coat of Tamiya Flat Clear Finish. Tester's Dull Coat also works the same way. There are still some other details I'll need to add once I get this on the layout, such as the unloading conveyor that leads from the track to the elevator leg, but I think you get the point with the almost final product here, and I think it turned out pretty well. And now, my little M.F.A. plant is ready to provide some business for my Missouri-Kansas-Texas Railroad Sedalia Subdivision.